Welcome back. You're watching ET Insight. India's telecom sector is in the midst of an unprecedented crisis. The fate of several new operators is now in question as 2G spectrum allocated during A. Raja's tenure will now be auctioned all over again. The big question is that enough to clean up the mess in the telecom sector? I caught up with two veterans of the industry, Sanjeev Agha and Rajiv Chandrasekhar, and began by asking them just that.
I believe it's a good thing. It should have never happened. Ideally it should have never happened. But having gone through 2008 and 2009, this is a good restart for the telecom sector.
Does this also signal that we are a country that has never really got telecom policy right, and that it's unlikely that we're going to get it right even going forward?
Yes, I completely agree. You've taken the words out of my mouth. First of all, I agree with Rajiv in terms of the raw emotion. It's disgusting that for 4 years, such senior people, the whole world knew what was happening, and no one raised a finger. And emotionally, I think the analysis of the Supreme Court is right, the message is right. Now, unfortunately, they are put in a position at this stage, 4 years after the event, that the solution they've got, which is cancel everything, does contain a lot of collateral damage to areas. It's like chemotherapy, so it does do a lot of collateral damage. And it puts the ball back in the court of the TRAI principally, and to an extent the government, to unscramble the egg. But they are shell-shocked, and also the TRAI and the government have taken positions in public, and they've taken positions before the courts. So really, whether they have A, the strong desire, and B, the capability to start with a fresh focus and therefore I am equally worried about the next 10 years unless something dramatic is done.
Okay, it puts the ball back on the court of the TRAI and the government, the two very bodies that have been heavily criticized by the Supreme Court order. Rajiv Chandrasekhar, we can't take away the fact that we are in this mess because these two institutions have failed the sector and have failed this country. How are they going to fix it now?
There is a solution out of this if, as Sanjeev said and you said, there is the political will and more importantly than the will, I think the ability to work our way through this minefield. We are in a problematic area. We have never been here before, and it requires some serious political leadership to do the real things that are required to be done. We don't need at this stage more rhetoric. We don't need more speeches. What we need is, for example, we need a new telecom policy that focuses on the real issues that need to be focused on.
Rajiv is speaking about a new telecom policy. When the new minister Kapil Sibal took charge, he promised a policy in 100 days. I think it's been a year and a half. We don't have a policy, and all that we've seen is letters being exchanged from the Telecom Commission to the regulator and back and forth. Whether it's M&A, whether it's exit policy, we don't have a single piece of paper ready. So how are we to believe that this government or this leadership will get it right?
What I'm trying to say, Sandeep, is simple. There is a solution. We don't need to be worried that there is no solution. The solution is around two things. One is we've got to get a policy that addresses the fundamental issues that are plaguing the sector. We have to address issues of competition. We have to address issues of licensing. We have to address issues of regulation. And we have to also go out there and amend the TRAI Act to make the TRAI a lot more effective, lot more accountable, and lot more responsible for its regulation. So we know what needs to be done. It is a different question. You need to ask a follow-up question. Am I a betting man on whether the government will do it or not? That's a separate question, and there's a separate answer for that.
Okay, no one's betting on whether the government will do this or not, but much of this is unlikely to happen in 4 months. And Sanjeev Agha, what about the possibility of some serious legal battles? Third-party rights have been created. What if one of the companies whose licenses have been scrapped chooses not to participate and seeks a refund? What if some of the vendors sue the companies whose licenses have been scrapped? We're looking at various options. In the modalities of the auction. What if existing players are kept out and the auction is restricted only to new players, in which case I'm sure an existing player like a Bharti will again challenge the government. Anything that the government does will be challenged.
Sandeep, you've asked me a question and I have thoughts on all of this, but I don't want to answer your question. I want to take further what Rajiv has said, because I believe whatever answer I give you, however correct, it will just be a band-aid. It will just get us from one ditch to another ditch. And I've been associated with the sector for over a decade. We are deeply resentful as to what we've had to go through. I think what needs to be done, I would go further than what Rajiv is saying. I think the role of the Telecom Ministry is over. This kind of an animal doesn't exist anywhere in the world. So why do we have a political ministry? There are inherent problems. However good the minister, it is inherently a flawed structure. Policy has to come from the Telegraph Regulatory Authority. Regulation comes from the regulator. The regulator is not an advisor, he does the regulation. And he is not an advisor, he is an authority. So I would have an independent, just like we talk of the CBI being independent of the Home Ministry, this has to be independent of the Telecom Ministry in terms of appointments, in terms of financing, and the talent pool has to be wider, the pay scales have to be, and this can all be accomplished real time in the next 3-4 months. The role of the Telecom Ministry, the minister should volunteer to reduce it because that's the right thing to do. And what I have suggested, and I would like people like Rajiv, who are members of parliament and whose voice is heard and who have no longer, can no longer be accused of any vested interest, we must get 3 people into the TRAI as additional members, very much like was done at the time of Satyam. So you have TRAI as the body, get 3 people, outstanding people. I can take names, but I will not do that now, whom no one can, who know the subject, who know regulation, who know telecom, get them to assist the TRAI. Otherwise the TRAI is both short of manpower and they've taken positions, they can't change those positions, so they need a bit of a break. So these people can simultaneously change the TRAI Act, redefine the role under the leadership of the Prime Minister, redefine the role of the ministry, and after you do that, solving these small problems about spectrum, whether old players, take my word for it, there is enough spectrum now. You see, operators have adjusted to living with very, very little spectrum. And how many operators are really left? 5 or 6. So there's a lot of spectrum with the defense and there's a lot of spectrum which is not being used. So this is a, this is now a pseudo shortage.
All right, let's get Rajiv's view on this. Rajiv, this seems to be a rather radical suggestion. Let the politicians give up control. Let's form a committee. Let's empower TRAI, something that even you had suggested. Let's get a 3-member independent panel that works with the TRAI and that frames policy. You're probably closer to the political class than definitely Sanjeev and I are. You're a member of the parliament. How feasible is it? Do you think the government, any government, would like to give up on control?
The problem today is there is a credibility deficit in terms of who will take these issues head on. Who will decide, for example, how to handle an investor that has invested in good faith in the telecom license, now finds himself out of pocket for over $1 billion. Somebody has to handle that issue. Now, is the government or a bureaucrat capable of handling it? Is the existing regulator capable of handling it? And the answer, common sense, no political agenda, just common sense tells you no, they cannot handle it because they are the ones who mishandled it. So there is a need for somebody to come in fresh from the outside. Either you reconstitute the TRAI or you create some sort of a, I don't know, something in the finance ministry or somewhere, a group of people that will be tasked to look at this issue and address all of the sub-issues that flow from this. Competition, licensing, incumbent versus new players, refund of license fees, division of spectrum, what is the minimum amount of spectrum. There are a number of issues and I completely agree with Sanjeev. We are having a problem, we will continue to have a problem if you toss this complex issue back to the same guys who created the mess.
To form a committee like that, it's a great idea on paper, but are we being too simplistic? Because it is a complex industry, and while it may have worked, say, in the case of a Satyam, the company is back on its feet, it may not work here because the interests are so fragmented. You know it more than anybody else. The interests are so fragmented. What works for one operator doesn't work for one operator. What works for one technology provider doesn't work for the other. Given that, will any solution be acceptable to all?
No solution will be free of criticism, but I believe that the country was in a similar mess in 1999, 1998, 1999. I believe there was, when you have desperate times, it requires statesmanship. So what my suggestion was, get 3 people and 3 people, 2 people, 4 people. I mean, I could take names, but whom no one will have issue with. No one can say that he's from the government or he's from the politics or he's from BJP. Get 2 or 3 people like that to work with them. This will give bandwidth. It will give them flexibility because they don't have a baggage, and it will give credibility. And these are people. So this is a solution. There could be other solutions, but just playing volleyball, you may solve you may get some, something about, say, spectrum, or say, incumbent versus new.
The M&A policy
but
or the exit
dash
policy.
it, we had a license, pending for 3 years, and that's been cancelled. So what good? So you cannot any longer set a store about, about a particular word. It has to be more dispensation.
Right.
There has to be a body, and there has to be a body which is permanently programmed to have a kind of caliber and a kind of people, and you have to set faith in that.
All right. But Rajiv Chandrasekhar, what's your view? My big fear really is, and I think it's the fear of everyone who's who's interested in the sector, is that probably a few years down the line we're left with a situation wherein few big foreign telcos have lost some serious money. They've probably headed back. We are back to a situation of having just 4 operators. It's not in the interest of the consumer. We are back to a situation where the tariffs are high, 3-4 operators making money, everyone else is eliminated, and half a dozen cases being fought at the High Court and the Supreme Court. What do you think are the chances of that happening?
No, I think that's a very reasonable scenario, Sandeep. I mean, and that is the worst case scenario, that you have essentially market power flow to 1 or 2 companies that are very well capitalized today to take advantage of what is a confused sector with inadequate competition and or weak competition. That is precisely what is anti-consumer, and that is not good for the country. We are at a crossroad, and it is not a crossroad which allows us the luxury of twiddling our fingers and academizing about this telecom sector for another 6 months. This is an urgent situation that needs some serious political leadership to put into place a solution that is complete. We cannot afford a delay, and or we cannot afford to now start quibbling around pieces of the solution. We can't talk about auctions 4 months later but not talk about the issue of competition. You cannot talk about this without strengthening the independent regulator. This is an opportunity, as well as in a lot of ways a last chance for us to fix this in the complete manner that it should have been fixed 5 years ago, 7 years ago.
Right.
And it's about consensus in media, and through media, people like you saying, look, this is how we should approach it. We don't want any shortcuts, nor do we want band-aids.
Right, but this will take time, Sanjeev Agha, because the Supreme Court has set a deadline of 4 months to conduct these auctions. We're talking about amending the TRAI Act, adding more people. Some of it may need parliamentary approval, and then to go ahead with auctions to put in place a framework. It's going to take time. Can the industry afford to give them some time? Because some of the large operators like Bharti, Idea, Vodafone have not got spectrum for years. Right now.
I mean, you're right, but I can tell you, I can't name solutions and I can't name persons. But I can tell you that people who mean well and whose perspective is clear and who have logical thinking can accomplish a lot in 4 months. And I would completely agree with what Rajiv is saying, because the small solutions have to be embedded and be part of a coherent structure. You cannot have incoherence. So you can't have a solution around spec. So you must have a big picture. So you need to go to people who either have it or are capable of having it. And once you've got a central architecture, then it becomes easier to put the jigsaw together. And you also have a compass that in the future, this is your principle and how you sort of tackle each issue. So 4 months is tight, but I could name a number of people who could do this in 4 months.
Rajiv Chandrasekhar, let you have the final word. What's your gut feeling? Do you think it will get significantly worse before it gets better?
My gut feeling is that it will get better. It will get better soon, because people have understood that we can't afford to play football with this anymore. And I completely agree that this is not a solution that requires 90 days or 100 days of intellectualizing. You put 3 good people into a room, and they will come up with what is required by way of policy prescriptions and whatever else administrative action in 90 days or even less, 60 days, they'll come back with it. I mean, this is very doable. It's a question of somebody saying we should do it.
Well, that's all we have for you in this edition of ET Inside. Do send us your feedback and suggestions for news and updates. Stay tuned to ET Now.